And some water. Oh, thank you. Yeah.
You should have this on the table.
Thank you very much for
Well, it's a pleasure.
the water.
For the water.
For the water. Water is life, huh?
Water is life.
Yeah.
And what a great start. Thank you for the water and this incredible story that you have written for this project is all about water.
Yeah.
Is it not?
Actually, it's about water. Yeah. Rain and the water and environment and yeah.
And it is, you are in a city. Let me just move this microphone a little closer.
Hear me? Yeah.
Right. We need it really right close like that.
Yeah.
So, this story, Nyambura, the multicolored bird and the rainbow, Ngugi, is about rain. This is a city of rain.
Oh, that's wonderful. Actually, you know, I've been here before.
I have been here before.
Actually, I was here before him. I just discovered. Huh?
You were here in 19...
I paved the way for you.
You paved... When did we, before I introduced you...
I was here in 1983, and I just came in. Rodney, where's Rodney? Gave me this leaflet, which is a collector's item by now, because there are only 2 of them, programs, when I was here in 1983. But I didn't remember, so thank you very much, Rodney, for reminding me of my previous visit to Manchester. Yeah.
Yeah.
But it is in a city of rain.
It is a city of rain.
2 days ago, when I came from Edinburgh, and there was plenty of rain.
Yes. Manchester is known for its rain, and the story that Ngugi has written for this project is about a young, well, you could explain for, actually, can we start again? We are going to start again. I'm going to give you the introduction that you deserve.
Okay.
And then we shall talk about the story that you have written for this project so that you can be in the picture. Because otherwise, because I love this man, and my first book was published when I was 21, and The Barrel of the Pen, which was written by you, was a book which meant a lot to me at that time. Ngugi, you've been writing for over 50 years. There are different people from different generations who will have their introductory moment into world literature through you. You, Chinua Achebe, Wole Soyinka are part of a canon of great writers that have influenced the world. However, of all the writers that are here, only one of them, I believe, has been imprisoned for what he thinks, and that is you.
Actually, let me remind the audience that he and I last met in a place called Paraty, a small town in Brazil, some years ago, where we had a similar conversation. So it's wonderful to see you again, actually, yeah.
That was the Literature Festival in Brazil.
In Brazil, it was really,
many great writers there, and I saw you, because you look like me, and I saw you at a very posh drinks do with a swimming pool and great hors d'oeuvres, and I saw Ngugi in the distance, and it just gently pootering through the crowd, and I made a beeline for you, and we went and sat down, and we chatted, and we laughed.
Yeah. And Paraty was built by enslaved Africans in about one of the earliest towns in Brazil, built by enslaved, Africans. Yeah, right.
And the story of enslavement is in many ways is at the heart of your story, in that you were born into effectively a prison. Essentially, that is what colonialism was.
Yeah, colonialism was like domestic slavery, because enslavement of Africans meant taking them away from the continent to all over. And as we know, there's no, apart from Brazil, even European cities, there's no modern European city where or in whose veins African blood does not run through. Yeah. Think of any, think of London, Bristol, Manchester, Liverpool, think of Bordeaux, Paris, and so Venice even, And the history is a history of modernity built on enslaved African labor.
So being born into that at 7 years of age, the Mau Mau Rebellion began.
Yeah, I was born in 1938. Yes, before many years before you were born. Because she told me that when I came in 1983 in Manchester, she was not yet born.
Yes. Yes, it's true.
Yeah. I was born in 1938 on the eve of the Second World War, right?
Yes. In Kenya.
In Kenya. And Kenya was a British settler colony from about 1895 to 1963. But by then when I was born into a settler colony. And for those who may not know, particularly the younger generation, there were two types of colonies in Africa and indeed in the world. There's a settler colony where Europeans or people from outside come and settle on your land, so to speak. And we've got very many good examples of settler colonies, say like America, Canada, Australia, New Zealand, in Africa, we think of Kenya, Zimbabwe, South Africa, Algeria, That was one type. That type of colony is what I like to call protectorate type, where there were still colonies, but their land was never an issue because there was no settlement, like Uganda, Nigeria, and Ghana, So Kenya was the settler type. And what's very interesting about the settler type of colony, that every single independence, land was always an issue in all those countries. And independence was won through armed struggle. So Mau Mau in Kenya was part of the armed struggle in Kenya that wrested independence from Britain.
And let us talk about not only the land grab, the physical land grab. Let us also speak of the mental and spiritual ownership of the land of the mind and of language in particular.
I've always said that economic control anywhere is incomplete without political control. And economic and political control are never really complete without mental control. And through cultural engineering, and cultural engineering involves also language is at the center of that cultural engineering, But cultural engineering is part of the colonial process, or for that matter, any process of domination, Because in a way, if you control someone's mind, either individually or collectively, you control a conception of who they are, right? You're controlling their capacity to dream or not dream, right?
It's a dream in English. It's a dreaming in Kikuyu.
A good example. Let me give you a personal example. My mother could not read or write, but she's the one who sent me to school. So the dream of education was really hers before it became mine, right? But when I went to school, I ended up writing my books in English.
Yes.
So in a way, when you come to think of it, I was imprisoning her dreams.
Oh. He was imprisoning.
Yeah, she went to school to dream in English.
Wow.
Surely not. Right?
And am I right in saying that you were punished at school if you spoke in Gikuyu or if you used...
The pattern of language control is the same in every system of domination. And involves making somebody feel uncomfortable about their language. Their language is humiliated. Negativity is associated with it. And quite frankly, it begins with Scotland and Ireland. Scotland and Ireland and Wales. It's in Wales where children were made to carry placards around their neck saying Welsh not. Either were caught speaking Welsh in the school compound. Yeah. In the case of the Irish, as early as 1593, Spencer, the poet,
Yes, I've met...
was to write a view of...
Sorry, let me just make it... I met Spender, not Spencer.
No, not Spencer. You can I know what you're thinking.
Sorry, please, I apologize.
Spencer, who was contemporary of Shakespeare. But I think what you're saying is that you and Shakespeare, no, all you're saying has the same poetic imagination. How about that? Yeah. Anyway, as far as 1595, I believe, he published a book called A View of Ireland at the present time. And here, he's got two interlocutors. One is an English settler in Ireland, another is a visiting lord from London. And they're asking, why is it for 200 years we have not been able to conquer the Irish? Right? Why? And they come up with a solution, language. So if we can make them forget their language and their naming system, if we can make them, in fact, he said, if we can make them forget these marks and O's, he says derisively, then we can make them forget who they are. Oh. So the book becomes, in fact, a program for the erasure of Irish memory of who they are, because if we can make them forget who they are, we shall conquer them. Now, the same pattern, you saw it in America in relation to Native Americans. Yes. Yeah. Captain Pratt, who started a school for American kids, Native American kids who were taken from California or from the west to the east. On the first day of arrival at the school in Carlisle, in Pennsylvania, in 1823, the children, the Indian and Native American kids, were given a pointer, and they would point at the blackboard for some marks. Whatever they pointed, that piece of paper was pinned on their back. That was their English name. They didn't know. They were just point at any name there. And they would point, and that would be their English name. And then they were humiliated about their Native American languages. Captain Pratt was later to say, actually, the aim of the school was to kill the Indian and save the man. Yeah. This was in 1823. And that idea of killing the native, to save whatever, is really common. It was called there in India, it was there in Africa. It was there in Japan, this is Korea. When Japan colonized Korea between 1910 and 1945, the first thing they did was to impose Japanese names on Koreans and Japanese language. Right. So the same pattern. It's a colonial thing. It's it's part of the system of
mental
yes,
control.
yes, yeah. And mental control is part and parcel of political and economic control.
Thank
Yeah.
you. Yeah. When did you make the...
In a way, when you come to think of it, it's like the whole idea of weaponizing one's own culture and language against themselves.
Wow.
Right?
Yeah, weaponizing one's own
yes,
culture
well, you
against
weaponize.
oneself.
Yes, exactly. Yeah.
Building one's own
Yeah,
prison.
yeah, you become sort of weaponized against yourself.
Oh.
You know? Yeah.
When did you make the decision to go into yourself and to speak, to write in Gikuyu only, which means that basically you turned down, I can't imagine how much financially that decision cost, or even in terms of notoriety, though you are world-renowned. You made the choice only to write in Gikuyu. I know Ngugi from a long time ago, Ngugi Wagoro, who was the first, was she the first translator of Gikuyu to English for you?
She's one of my books into
and now there is somebody else doing, and as you grow, the story must continue. But getting back to my point, when did you make the decision that you would only write in Gikuyu, having your entire education in English? It was a radical act.
Actually, I like telling stories. So let me tell you this story. I want to share this story. It happened a long time ago, actually. I think most of you are not born then. Let me see. I think you are not born. I can go back to 1966, right? In New York.
Yes.
Right? And there's an international pen conference. I was then a student, postgraduate student at Leeds University. But I was a published author of Weep Not Child, The River Between. So I go to New York. I'm invited as a guest of honor from Africa. It was an international conference. Writers from the formerly communist, from the Eastern Europe were invited. Pablo Neruda was there, and many Latin American writers were there. So you can imagine me as a young writer sitting. I know young writers, but as a young writer, I'm thinking, because I don't believe I'm a writer, although I published 2 novels. And so I'm trying to act the writer, all right? Try to look somber, so it's very serious.
That's the look. I want a camera. That's the look.
Right? So I end up with a Socratic look, Socratic pose. And I think I was in one of my Socratic poses. The session was Pablo Neruda, I believe. Norman Mailer was also there in that particular session. He was chairing the session and the panel, and the other, Pablo Neruda was there. And an Italian writer, the author of Bread and Wine, Ignatius Sloan, I think. And Sloan was talking, complaining about the lack of Italian translation, modern Italian writing translations into English and, say, French. He was complaining. Then he said, now, please remember this, I'm in my Socratic pose. So I'm not hearing what we are saying. Then I hear these words, and Italian is not like one of these Bantu languages with 1 or 2 words in their vocabulary. Gone was the Socratic pose. Africa, and I was a guest of honor. They were regional guests of honor, so I was from Africa. And my Africa now is being attacked Okay? So I had to stand up and defend African languages and say there are certainly more than 2 words in their vocabulary, outrage. Okay?
I'm taking a picture.
Yeah. Now, then, to cut a long story short, then I come back to Leeds. Okay? And I was in the middle of my 3rd novel, A Grain of Wheat. But in what language was I writing it? In English. But I just come from New York, proclaimed to the whole world that African languages had more than 2 words in their vocabulary. And there I am, acting out the very thing that I was complaining about. So that was a very important moment for me of agony and thinking and, yeah. But the second moment, equally important, was when I was in 1977, after I returned to Kenya, and I'll make the long story short. Then I'm put in a maximum security prison. You can read about it in my book, Wrestling with the Devil. Yeah, I put in a maximum security prison for having participated in the writing of a play to be acted by ordinary men and women of the village in my language, my mother tongue, Ikoyo language. It's called I'll Marry When I Want. And I'm put in a maximum security prison. From being a professor, I'm a prisoner for writing in Ikoyo, right? So 1978 was a crucial year for me because the memories of New York and other things came back, memories of history came back, memories of colonialism came back, and so on. And that's when I made a decision. In prison, in a maximum security prison, that's when I switched from English to Ikoyo. In other words, I said, I'm going to write in a very language which was the basis of my incarceration. And I wrote my first novel, Devil on the Cross, in Ikoyo language, and on, you know what, on toilet paper, anyway, because I didn't have any other paper in prison, yeah. So that was really when, so the crucial year is 1978.
78.
In a maximum security prison.
And from that day onwards, you wrote in Gikuyu?
Yeah, I write in Gikuyu mostly. I would say mostly because some theoretical works and so on, I still write in English, but my fiction, my poetry, my drama, I now write in Gikuyu language.
For this particular event?
My recent work, actually, was what I call Venetian poems. I went to Venice 3 years ago, so I wrote a series of poems in Gikuyu on Venice called Venetian poems.
The fact that you have written, made the decision to write in Gikuyu, the language which you are keeping alive by doing so, that you did that in a prison, that you had that epiphany, as Oscar Wilde had epiphany when he was in prison. As I also would like to say, I would love to have spoken to you about Rafiki, the film, and the censorship that's happening from the government towards Wanuri, the director, who brought the film here, and how your play was banned some 50 years ago. We've not got the time, I'm afraid.
Prison is you think of prison as a symbol of confinement. You are confined. So you can think of prison and think of other prisons.
Yes.
You can think of slavery and plantation slavery actually as a prison.
Yes.
So you can think of many other prisons.
Kinds of prisons.
You can think of, becomes for me a symbol of confinement. So when in prison, I use my imagination to break free of confinement.
Yes.
And that's how I came to think of art thereafter. Art, in a way, dreams, is a way of human beings breaking free of confinement. Okay?
Yeah.
You know, and the struggle, because you know, all authoritarian regimes or tendencies is to suppress the arts, all the areas of imagination, because they don't like people to imagine a different world, different possibilities. But dreams always invite possibilities. Eh? The impossible is in a dream, right? Yeah. Sorry.
No, it's absolutely beautiful. The idea that the imagination is free and that it needs to be, it's just beautiful.
In fact, that's what, okay, if I do tell, in my book, Wrestling with the Devil, I do talk how I came to actually write the novel. And this is when I realized I'm confined in a maximum security prison with many walls, within walls, and so on. I'm not allowed to any contact with the outside world, not with my family, not with my friends.
You can't read any books.
I can't read books and so on.
Yeah.
Then one night I realized something, that actually every night I was breaking free of prison.
Yeah.
Yeah, because in my imagination, I could walk the streets of my home. I could interact with my family. I could see them.
Yes.
Right? You know, so every night, even day, my mind could break through the walls of prison. So I came to the realization, in fact, I say this in my book, imagination became my wings of glory.
Yeah.
So with these wings of glory, I could fly out, go to all and then come back.
You know, you say Wings of Glory, and your story, Nyambura, about Nyambura is all about literally the wings of glory.
Yeah, that story, by the way,
beautiful.
I wrote it for my grandchildren. One of them actually is Mokoma's daughter.
Right.
You know,
Right.
They are friends with my son,
Yeah.
who is also a writer, Mokoma.
We have connections over there.
Yeah, and they have, my son Mokoma has a daughter called Nyambura, and my other son Dosho has a daughter called Nyambura, and my daughter Wajiko. And they are all writers. They have daughters called Nyambura, because it's named after the Mokoma's mother, my first wife, Nyambura. It means she who brings rain.
She who brings rain. So that's what the name means.
Nyambura. And you find a mount in Zulu. In Zulu, it's called Mvula.
Right.
You find Mvula, Nyambura all over the continent.
Right. Yeah. I know an Mvula from South Africa.
Yeah, Mvula. It's the same name.
Yeah. Okay,
Nyambura. Yeah.
Okay.
She who brings rain. Yeah.
She who brings rain.
Yes. So a story really about them. You know, the bringer of rain. Yeah.
And may I say that you chose a girl to be the heroine or the hero of this story, and likewise in the 1950s you chose a woman. I can't remember the book, but you chose a woman as the central character in. I'm sorry.
Yeah, I think in most of my books there are, you know, Devil on the Cross.
Yes.
Warenga, actually.
Yes. Is that a deliberate choice, and if so, why?
But I know what you're talking about. Recently, I published another book, an epic in Gikuyu language. It's called A Perfect 10 in English. It will be translated into English under the title The Perfect 10. And this is what happened. Among the myth of origins of the Gikuyu community, the one I come from in Kenya, they say the original man and woman was one man, one woman, Gikuyu and Mombi. And they had 9 daughters, who were actually 10. But they had no brothers. Mm-hmm. It's only when they came of marriageable age that some suitors came elsewhere. Mm-hmm. But anyway, I was in Harvard when I thought, wait a minute. If they had no brothers until the age of marriage, it means they were the ones who were doing all the work. Huh? You know, they're not brothers to turn to for do this because I'm too weak or whatever. So they had know how to build, make clothes, trade, defend themselves, right? So make weapons of self-defense and so on. Plan, think. So I said, wait a minute. I now know about the story of the original feminists. Yeah.
Ngugi, you've taken us from Ireland and the taking of language to Native Americans and the taking of their language to Kenya, to South Africa. Your knowledge is beautiful to sit next to. Ngugi wa Thiong'o in Manchester, just across from the Free Trade Hall where Hugh Masekela performed in the anti-apartheid movement, just around the corner from where there's a statue of Lincoln where the people of Manchester would not take the cotton because of the slaves. Just around the corner from the Pan-African Congress meeting in 1945.
That was very important.
That was at the University of Manchester up there. Just around the corner from the University of Manchester where Arthur Lewis was the first black lecturer in the history of Britain, and although we only call ourselves by the colour of our skin when we're in the minority, just around all of that, in the Albert Hall, from me to you, and I'd like you to take a picture and hashtag it, please, because I want to remember this on Twitter. I really do. I just want to, as a writer myself, as a Mancunian, as an Ethiopian, which is right next to your country.
It's very important for Pan-Africanism, remember?
Yes, it is. The Organization of Africa Unity in Addis Ababa, and Nkrumah came to the first one.
Nkrumah was there. Jomo Kenyatta from Kenya was there.
Yes, yes.
Du Bois was there.
Yes. As they were there at the Pan-African Congress here in Manchester.
Actually, you are right. Manchester is very, very important for the African imagination or imaginary.
Yes.
Yes.
I'm just going to touch on that to end the talk and to say, ladies and gentlemen, please give a warm round of applause for Ngugi wa Thiong'o.
Oh, thank you.